Welcome to the Center for Living Organ Donation and the Kidney Foundation of Canada's second Caregiver Connections webinar. My name is Andrew and I will be your co-moderator this afternoon. I am a caregiver to my wife, Lori, and I am also a living donor. My wife was diagnosed with nephritis following the birth of our son back in 1984 and started home peritoneal dialysis in 2013. In 2015, via paired exchange, she received a kidney and I donated anonymously through that process. I've been volunteering with the Kidney Foundation since about 2017. I also co-facilitate patient peer support meetings as well as the caregiver peer support meetings. I also moderate the Kidney Connect or kidneyconnect.ca, which is an online blog. Being retired has given me more time to give back and assist others. And so this is my retirement activity and I totally enjoy it. Erwin is the other co-moderator. Go ahead, Erwin, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very important and hopefully informative webinar. This is part 2. The response from participants and panelists following part 1 was such that we decided it would be worthwhile and also very critical to follow up with part 2, hence today's session. As Andrew said, my name is Erwin. I'm a caregiver to my wife, Kathy, who was diagnosed in 2016 with chronic kidney disease, which came up through a series of routine medical appointments. Needless to say, we were shocked by the information that we got, but once over the shock, we went about our lives without much regard to the impact that her kidney disease would have in the future. In 2020, things got a little bit worse, which necessitated us hooking up with a nephrologist at the Ottawa Hospital who run the multi-care clinic. They've been very good to us. Kathy's health continued to decline. And in early 2021, we mounted a search for a living kidney transplant donor to be done on a preemptive basis. A lot of people will have some knowledge about the extent of the workup that is done. And it's a good news, bad news story. The good news is that Kathy was worked up 6 ways from Sunday. We were able to find 2 matching donors. The bad news is that during the process, she was found to have lung cancer. That was successfully treated in December of 2021. 6 months later, that would have been this past June, we had a follow-up appointment with her lung oncologist, and he was very pleased with the results. There's not been any negative growth. Everything seems to be stable. So in about a year's time, we are looking forward to getting back onto the transplant list. And added to that hopefulness is the people who have tested as good matches have also said that they'd be willing to wait. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that nothing bad happens in the intervening time. And without too much time, we will have Kathy on a transplant. So with that being said, I'm going to ask Andrew to continue with the next part of our presentation.
Okay. Today, our 2 main themes we will focus on is self-care and advocacy. Okay. Friendly reminder that if you have any questions for any of our panelists, to please type them in the Q&A panel that on your screen. If you're joining by phone, you'll basically just have to interrupt at an appropriate time because there's no way that you can actually just put up your hand. And we'll please to answer your questions towards the end of the fireside chat. Now we have 5 remarkable individuals that are caregivers and caregivers to the loved ones. They all have unique stories to share, and Erwin is going to quickly go through the list and introduce them to you. Go ahead, Erwin.
Thanks again. I've been asked to read the bios of our 5 panelists, and I figure I hope that I do justice to the information that I've been provided with. These are 5 very special people. I'd like to start with Francine, who's been a caregiver for her husband, Larry, who was diagnosed quite unexpectedly with kidney failure in June of 2015. Francine is also a living donor, and she was able to donate one of her kidneys to Larry in 2015. Throughout their kidney journey, Francine has been at her husband's side, where he underwent in-center hemodialysis 3 times a week and then peritoneal dialysis at home. She's also a facilitator with the Kidney Foundation's peer support groups. And next, I'd like to tell you about Mr. David Lillian. David's been a caregiver for his wife, Bonnie, for almost 3 years now. His role as a caregiver means providing Bonnie with any assistance that she requires, ranging from managing the supplies and medications that she needs to participating in their periodic interactions with the renal medical team at UHN, the University Health Network in Toronto, for those people who may be outside of Ontario and may not know it. Moreover, he sees his principal role in providing Bonnie with encouragement and positive emotional support. And it helps that they consider themselves to be best friends and they still have lots of fun together. And I understand that they just recently came back from a trip, so we might even hear a bit about that. The third on my list is Uzma Quadri. Uzma lives in Mississauga with her 2 children, her husband, and his parents. And Uzma's situation was quite unique in that she was a caregiver for her late mother, who was diagnosed with renal failure in 2016. She started peritoneal dialysis in 2018 after discussions with the family about that, and unfortunately passed away in early 2021. Now, Uzma, along with her 2 sisters, took care of her mom, and they had a very unique situation in that they did everything that they possibly could for mom. And Uzma was the lead caregiver, specialist in hospital appointments, and took care of most of the home and personal care throughout the time. Now, Maria is somebody that I've only been introduced to recently. I hope to learn a little bit more about Maria's situation. She's a caregiver for her husband, Luis, who was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis at the age of 15. They started dating when they were 18, so they have a long history together. They've been married for 24 years, and they have 2 children. In December of 2018, Luis was diagnosed with a hepatocarcinoma, marking the start of their liver transplant journey. In December of 2019, Luis had his first liver transplant, which unfortunately failed. 9 days later, he was fortunate to receive another liver transplant, and that happened on the 23rd of December. And they've returned to their home in Ottawa. So all of what was happening with Luis occurred in Toronto, and they made frequent trips back and forth between Ottawa and Toronto due to complications that occurred over the year. They're very happy now to be back in Ottawa, and it's been 2.5 years, and they consider themselves to be living a completely normal life and enjoying every second of it. And finally, I'd like to introduce Sarah Shrubshall. Sarah's a mom to 2 daughters. She's also the primary caregiver for her youngest, who has a rare kidney disease that was diagnosed when she was 6 years of age, and she's now 15. So lovely teenager and living life. So Sarah and her husband have spent many a night with her youngest at the daughter's bedside at the hospital, attended multitudes of doctor's appointments, and as a caregiver of a child living with CKD, Sarah's main responsibility, among other things, was to make sure that she was hooked up to her dialysis machine every night, and that was done for 5 years. Sarah has been a supporter, an advocate, and a loving parent throughout her daughter's first transplant that unfortunately did not take, and through the second transplant that's been successful now for almost 2 years. Sarah and the crew love to travel and spending time as a family. So now that we all know who our panelists are going to be, I'm going to ask Andrew to open up our discussion session.
Okay. As you are going to discover more, and as you probably just heard from this, the people that are working on this are very committed. They've been with us for a while, and there's very broad experiences and things that they can comment on. After the first webinar, we had a discussion afterwards, and there were certain topics that came up. So what we've done for the second webinar is we've selected some of those topics, and basically we have basic formulated questions, and each of these individuals at various times will respond to it. So the first thing that I'm going to address is about self-care, and Maria will be responding to this. The question that we're raising here is, or that has been raised, is what are some of the new skills and or resources that you have used in the past or currently, such as apps on your phone, journals to take notes, writing your own thoughts and feelings, meal planner, or something such as agreeing to have someone mow your lawn? Maria, would you please talk to that, please?
Sure. I've never written a journal or anything like that, but I did some things to help my specific situation. So for me, it was very important to feel that life kept going on, and that despite the situation, I had at least some control of what was happening. So that helped me. And in that train of thought, I always try to keep life as normal as possible for me and for my family. So for example, I was very careful on planning very nutritional meals that were shared as a family. So not just for my husband, but for all of us. And that was part of something that I could do to help. For me, it was important to feel that I was actually doing something to help the situation. And this is something that I could do. So we changed our meal plans, and we always ate the same. We tried to keep the person that was sick as part of the family. So we kept feeling as a family that was working through this. Another thing that I did is my parents-in-law flew from Colombia and stayed with us for a long time. We have no family in Canada, so that was super helpful. They kept our house going and gave my daughter the opportunity to stay in a school in Ottawa and to keep attending her swimming and her gymnastics and all that while we were in Toronto. So I think that was important for her. Another thing that I used to do is, for me specifically, it helped talking about what was happening. I know that some people don't feel comfortable sharing situations, but for me, it helped. So what I felt is when I was sharing for example, what was happening with my mom, it helped me at the same time to organize my own ideas, to put it in my perspective, to hear myself saying what was happening, helped me understand what was happening better and feel like, okay, I have it. I can do this, we're working through it. So that helped me. Something else that I did was, we always thought that this was a family journey, and it wasn't just my husband or my journey, it was a family. So we shared everything that was happening. We talked to my adult son about what was happening, and we also talked to my 10-year-old at that time. She was 9 actually when he was diagnosed. And we explained to her the situation. And I think that helped in the sense that if she would see someone upset at home, she understood what was happening. And if we had to go away, she knew what was happening. And she had the opportunity to ask questions and participate in the conversation. So that helped me and that helped her, I think. Something else, I am a very religious person, so I did pray a lot. And I think that it's not the same for everyone, but it helped me. I think that helps you to have something to cling to. when things are difficult. And I also think that it's important, and this is the last thing that I want to say about it, is to express your feelings. I think that we do a lot to keep things under control, and sometimes we stop ourselves from showing what we're feeling. And I think that's important. I think that everyone has to express what they are feeling, and let the bad moments be bad, and let the good moments be good. Yeah, that's how I handle that.
Okay, thank you, Maria, and thank you for sharing some very personal thoughts and moments. Erwin?
My first question is for Sarah. What I would like to find out from you is, when your daughter was first diagnosed, from that moment leading to the present, what or how have you changed as a caregiver with regards to your approach of support for them, and how you provide self-care for yourself along with supporting your mental wellness while juggling the roles that you play as a mother, wife, and a caregiver? Big question, but I'm sure that you've given it some thought.
It is a big question. I have 6 points to go over. The biggest thing was we had to be a family outside of a kidney issue. There has to be a balance between life and dealing with a sick child. So that was the one thing. What we did early on, we bought a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone back then, so I needed a way that people could contact me from school, from outside daycare to sporting events. What was happening with Kiana, if something were to happen, I was the first line to get a hold of. And then the other thing was learning how to cook a kidney-friendly diet that everyone would eat at the table and still have meals that were for younger kids. It was a little bit challenging, but as it goes on, we've learned to adapt meds with food and that kind of stuff. The other thing was asking extended family for help. Never feel like they're not going to help you. We had people make meals for us. We had people come over, look after Kiana and my other daughter. Rick had decided right from the beginning of have date night, and we did continue with that. So we had our own time. And when you're out, you have to really be careful not to just focus on Kiana's needs. And it was, what's going on in your life? What have you done this week? That kind of stuff. And then very active I was. So I continued with my figure skating and continued to this day to play badminton once a week. Hopefully when COVID is a little bit more relaxed, we can get back to that. It wasn't a competitive badminton. It was just getting out with a league once a week, playing with other people and enjoying life that way. The last thing was getting a calendar on our phone. So all the appointments go in there for everyone. And then we get an email in the morning when we wake up. Oh, this person has this today. This person has that today. You're juggling everything, but it works. And then the last thing was dialysis. So when Kiana got a little older, we taught her how to do the dialysis, her older sister and my parents. So she was able to go for sleepovers at Grandma and Grandpa's and gave us a break as well.
Very interesting. Very creative is certainly giving her the responsibility for taking care of the machine. I know it can be quite complicated, and it gives her that extra level of freedom, which is kudos to you for doing that. Andrew, I will ask you to go on to our next question, please.
Okay, our next question, and we'll go to Francine in a moment. It says, we were wondering, how do you, as a primary caregiver to your loved one, know how to distinguish when you need support, when you need to step back and accept caregiver support from others?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm going to answer that in about 2 different ways. So the unplanned circumstances that have happened since 2015, and then the planned event, which was the surgery for transplant. So when in my intro, Erwin mentioned that it came quite unexpectedly and it came on an urgent basis. So my husband was hospitalized on an emergency basis and was told that he was in kidney failure and needed to go on dialysis. I would say that those first few weeks, I was overwhelmed. There was so much to just get used to the shock of the news, dealing with family that was out of town that just wanted to have the latest information, to our daughter and granddaughters and son-in-law just coming into the situation too and try to help us. Getting used to a whole bunch of new medications, getting used to a new diet. He's also diabetic, so not only are we dealing with kidney disease, but diabetes and also ophthalmology, eye issues. And so it was just completely overwhelming. I remember a month into this, I wasn't doing very well. I wasn't coping very well. I would say I was just, my whole focus was on him. And there was my favorite, absolutely favorite band that came into town. I live in Ottawa, and my family, my brother and family was going to the concert. As soon as I got there, the concert, I just started to cry. And this, I tell you, this is like my absolute favorite band since the 70s. I've seen them a number of times and I couldn't even listen to any of their songs. And usually one of their songs is like one of my go-to songs that if I feel like I'll just dance to it and it just lifts me up. I cried the whole time. And I ended up leaving the concert. I thought, I can't do this. And so crying all the way home. And that was, I think, a realization that I had pretty well hit a bit of rock bottom. And during that time, however, I did have girlfriends that provided meals, and we did have support from our church too, our church friend family, and slowly started to bring people into the tent, so to speak. And I just realized, I think that time at the concert was a realization that, okay, I can't keep going like this. And I had friends that had offered to even come and mow the lawn. And at the beginning, you think, oh, I can handle that. I can do it all. And then quickly realize that, quickly, a month into it, realize that no, I am completely spent. And so I got much better at reaching out and asking people to help, and they did. Having said that, the load is still on your shoulders because you are the primary caregiver. And like Maria, I'm a person of faith, and throughout that, I would rely on praying, listening to worship songs that would just lift me up. That became my first go-to place, and my faith was a source of strength in my church family also. So then we adapted to the schedule of in-center hemodialysis 3 times a week, and that was an adaptation, but and there were bumps along the road, but I think that I was getting much better in terms of realizing the care that I needed, like self-care for myself in terms of being aware. I started to tap into a lot more, okay, what am I feeling today? Like that personal check-in in terms of what are my emotions, what am I feeling? And I thought just validating those for myself was really useful. And I journaled. I also started to journal a lot. And so those were sort of my tools. And then we got into PD, peritoneal dialysis at home. And that was an adaptation also. My husband took it on quite well. Like he was able to pretty well be independent, but with my assistance also. So I think we got into more of a rhythm there. But there were still a lot of hospital appointments and that sort of thing. So there were times when his friend, a couple of times his friend drove him to the hospital and drove him back. So I took a step back a couple of times, not often, but I needed that. And then came the surgery in 2018. So I'd say that was like a planned event. I'm a planner by nature. And so we had a family meeting with our daughter and granddaughters and with one of my cousins. And I was able to itemize, okay, this is what we're going to need. There's going to be 2 of us now in the house that need attention, like being his donor. I needed care also as he would. So we had my daughter dedicated to my husband, and my granddaughter was dedicated to me, and my cousin as a backup because she would drive and she lived not far. So we absolutely needed that. But this is where I think some of my strengths came in, was to be able to explain the situation well to my daughter and granddaughter for them to fully understand what would be needed here. And so I call that sort of like a planned event where we were able to bring in the proper supports and also people helping us with meals. My granddaughter was amazing. She stayed with us for 2 weeks and just provided all of our needs, and our daughter. And then just so everything's been going well. And then up until recently, May and June, I actually had to go to the emergency twice, which was an unplanned event. And that just really threw us for a loop because my husband hasn't been able to drive for 2 weeks. So he wasn't, for 2 years, he hasn't been able to bring me to the hospital. And I ended up going to the hospital by myself. One of them was by ambulance. And then I realized I don't have a backup plan. I don't have a plan B in terms of who's taking care of the caregiver. So that was a real eye opener. And it's still a work in progress, but that is something that I need to just pay more attention to and figure out with my daughter. I've had a conversation with her about next time, if ever I have to go to the ER, you need to be there with me. I thought I could handle it by myself. Obviously, that was a mistake. And I learned, I think, by going through difficult episodes that I can't do it by myself, and that I need to be much faster at reaching out and accepting. I had a friend who had offered to come to ER with me, and I said I'll be fine, and then realized I wasn't. So I need to be much more attentive and realize that I needed to reach out. So that's in a nutshell my answer in terms of the difference between those circumstances that are planned and those that happen, that now I know I need to reach out faster.
Thank you, Francine. I know we're having some of a very serious conversation here, but I'm probably not the only one who wants to know, what was the group?
Oh, the group, the name of the band, the Doobie Brothers.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm really dating myself. This is the group from the 70s. They're still performing everywhere.
Excellent music. Not a bad choice at all.
Thank you. Long Train Running.
Exactly. My question next is for Uzma, and it actually spins off of one of the things that Francine was talking about in terms of advocacy and looking out for yourself. So Uzma, as I'd mentioned before, you were the primary caregiver for your mom along with your sisters. What I'd like to know is how you were able to juggle the other family members' suggestions, thoughts, and feedback. And how did you carry out the multiple opinions when trying to advocate for yourself and your mom, and what their feelings were and what they wanted for themselves?
Sorry, I have a bad throat, so please excuse me, everyone. There's advocacy, as everybody knows, it's an important part in protecting your loved one. And for me, especially for my mother, it's a huge deal. And for me, it's very different because it was for my mom, who is no longer. She was on peritoneal dialysis, and that came later. But I can look back for what we did with her, me, myself, and my sisters. But initially, how I look at it is there were phases. So each phase required a different type of advocacy, and because initially when it was just first kidney failure, it was different because my mom was still mobile, she was still independent, she could do things on her own. So it was just between her and the doctor and the medical team looking into. And me, what I would do is, the most important thing was I had to inform what was happening at the doctor's offices and inform all my siblings. We are 5, my one sister lived here and two brothers overseas and one sister in the US. So we had a WhatsApp page and I had to inform everybody. So everybody was well educated in what's happening so that if ever anything was to happen or what was going on, that was very important. It was always informing. I had to get best educated. I had to ask all the questions and I had to inform everybody about that. And also I had to get educated enough to educate my mom properly. My mom was there, of course, in all the appointments, but I had to re-educate her enough for her to make her own choices as well, but also so that I could guide her. But along the way, what I was noticing is me being the primary caregiver, me being the daughter also, would get a lot for her. I think it was just too much. So sometimes another sibling had to talk to her, somebody else with a different experience, a different method, and that helped with us. It was family. It was 5 children, everybody with a different way of talking and advising her. That helped because, like I said, first it was just accepting just that. When the second phase came, it was resistance. So we had to work on her resistance and had to accept her dialysis. And it was finally accepting, then it was adjusting, and then COVID hit and all the restrictions came. And that was a big part. And then educating again and having the whole family on the same page and just getting educated on about every single thing. And but the best thing was majority of the family was on the same page. And that was a very positive thing for us. And but the hardest part was for us as family was phase 3, when she was hospitalized a lot in the last year, or just before the last year, 3 times. And I usually used to stay with her, but when COVID hit while she was in hospital, that was the hardest part. So there we had to communicate with the medical team at the hospital. We had to be there for our mom to advocate for her, whether it was a nurse's station, where it was the medical team, the doctors, every single category. My mom would used to be scared a lot of times. So she'd call each 3 of us daughters all the time. And just what I forgot to mention is that when we finally decided that she's going on dialysis, my third sister moved, her entire family moved from Florida to Canada and stayed with her. We now were 3 daughters taking turns and looking after her. So each one could participate, talk on behalf of her. During that time, I was also hospitalized twice. And because my mom was very comfortable with me being the primary caregiver, especially for medical appointments and stuff, I actually was on the phone while another one took her to the doctor's appointments or anything. I would be on the phone talking because I could talk comfortably, and then my mom would feel comfortable for that. And so we all participated. We were all there protecting her and looking after her. And so the third part of the hospital was very important. And just while as caregivers, it was important. We were always on the phone with her, helping her, supporting her. And just that was a very important part, that you are there for her, just in conversation with the medical team at all times and making sure that she is comfortable and she understood, and she did. And all the siblings was important. You can get one odd one that may not agree with everything all the time, but you have to try and educate everyone the best way that you can. So it's important for you to understand have all your questions ready, which we did all the time. At times the doctors used to say, I'm sure everybody goes through that are you in the medical field? That's how many questions I used to have ready all the time. And then I would just make sure that everything is being done right by your parent. It was an honor to look after my mom, and that's how we were there for her.
Thank you so much. Andrew?
Okay. One of the common things here amongst us all, we all caregivers, but there are people out there that are patients of CKD that do not have caregivers, And obviously do not have someone immediately right now, like we all talk about and what we're doing for our loved ones. David, would you like to just comment in on your thoughts on caregiving in general, please?
A lot of what I'm going to say, I think, really touches on some of the points that have already been made. First of all, I can't imagine how difficult it would be not for someone who doesn't have a regular caregiver, someone who's not on site. There's some practical considerations that seem so basic, but they're so important. Just the ordering, the storage, and management of the supplies and the heavy boxes, the handling the medication schedules, and the issues of diet that come to mind. If you don't have someone there as a regular active caregiver, I think that would present some real challenges. My wife is the kidney patient and I'm her live-in caregiver. I'm retired, and so I'm pretty much available 24/7, and I can help deal with whatever situations or circumstances come up. But my wife takes a high degree of personal responsibility for her own care. That certainly simplifies the role that I need to play. However, as Francine mentioned, what happens if I'm unavailable or incapacitated? She would need to find someone to take up my role, and primarily for the things that are like physically difficult for her to do, like schlepping boxes or driving to appointments. She'd have to lean on others. We don't have really a good plan for doing that, and it is a concern. I can't emphasize the importance also of having someone to talk to, an outlet for discussing your inner feelings, your concerns, and your fears. So, you know, that both hers and mine. And likewise, there are times like when we need to advocate for her and I try to encourage her to advocate for herself. It might be dealing with her nephrologist, her renal team, her pharmacist, and so on. It's like staying on top of the situation because it's always changing. It's always in flux. There's always new challenges that come up. And when needs arise or things change, you have to take the bull by the horns. And to ensure that they're dealt with expediently, properly. And let's face it, you're only like one of many cases that the medical professionals are having to deal with. How do you make sure that you get your needs taken care of? They're busy people, and you've got to ensure that, you know, you have to be proactive. And that's the key word, to advocate for yourself and your loved one. Andrew, since you asked for tips, I'm going to try to put it in a nutshell. There are three I might offer. The first is, and again, it's been discussed earlier, and that's a whole area of communication. It's critical that you, as the caregiver, understand how your person's feeling, how your loved one is feeling. Like, what are they going through? You have to constantly be proactive and asking, how are you feeling? How are your numbers looking? Are there any aches and pains? Are you feeling tired? What can I do to help? You might be hearing this anyways, but it's up to you basically to ensure that everything's out on the table. Unless you really understand what they're going through, you're going to be limited in terms of how much you can do for them. Likewise, it's important, I think, to lay your cards on the table as well and let them know what you're going through, what you're thinking. In the end, it's going to be good in the long run that you get the communication out there. Another area I think is important is like self-assessment. And that's really as a caregiver, what are your honest feelings about the role that you have been thrust into? What satisfactions do you get from the caregiving? Likewise, what frustrations do you feel? It's a hard one because you have to be objective and open and honest with yourself about what those are. Like, many of us just go about and we do what needs to be done, but as things go along, the question is, by helping your loved one, are you losing yourself? And if you're really able to look at it, maybe you can find better ways to help deal with the situation. And that's really the key. It's dealing with the situation. The third thing I would say, and last thing, is to stay positive. Attitude is so important. Your role as caregiver is one of support. And your role is to be the cheerleader, the coach, and the source of positive energy. It's up to you. Whatever you might be feeling inside, you've got to spread sunshine. You've really got to make an effort to keep it positive, put things in their best light, to provide hope and to provide encouragement. It's contagious and essential. As they say, attitude is everything. So there's lots of other things to consider, but I honestly think that the three most important are good communications, having a sense of self-awareness as caregiver, and maintaining that positive attitude.
Thank you, David. Now we are going into the Q&A portion of everything. I do want to say that many of our caregivers group addresses the importance and the questions raised that the caregiver has themselves, and it can be directed as to handling being a caregiver. It's not just about the one you're giving care to. So I do encourage you to be active, and we'll go over some of the resources at the end. But being a caregiver can be stressful on yourself. You have to be aware of that, and you can always join one of our groups and discuss whatever you want to bring up. It doesn't have to be about the person you're giving care to, which is why this group was formed on the kidney side, because we realized there was a need for that. Now, there were some questions that came in prior. Sorry, there were some questions that came in prior, and we discussed that we would bring these up. Uzma, you were going to briefly address diet. Is there anything you wish to say at this point now?
Sure, thank you. I can put in what everybody goes through that, but I can put in my perspective with my family, since I had what I experienced with my mom. So it's not always easy, or it wasn't in my family or with my mom, but it started off as Maria had mentioned earlier. The first thing always, it's seeing the nutritionist, the dietitian, and that is the first biggest step possible, because I think that is where you get educated, and education is power. Unless you can't move forward with that, you have to know that, and then you have to educate the family too, because I think, but it is a lot easier, the smaller the family, easier to provide, and it is very difficult. It was more difficult with me in particular, because this was my mother who had lived longer, had provided for everyone else. Her style of living and cooking for everyone else was different. She could feed the whole world. She would have parties all the time. She cooked amazing food, but very rich. And she was like literally a chef. She cooked amazing food. So imagine a person like that being told not to have salt in their diet, and she also had she developed a heart condition. She had to reduce oil. She had diabetes. So there were so many things to consider. So I had to get really educated in everything, and I had to make the best. I am my mother's daughter, so I did have interest in cooking, and I tried my best, and came from the dietitian. I learned ways and methods of trying to make the best, but we incorporated that into the family also as best as we could, and tried to make our cultural dishes and learned new recipes so that it didn't feel like we're cooking something for us and something separate for her. But it is difficult with our type of cultural food, definitely. But we did try, but you can't totally omit the salt from our diet, but I came up with methods. So made the same type of food, but just kept separate portions for her, and then included a little bit of salt for the rest of the family. So she would be eating the same, but just made it a bit more healthier for her, the same kind of food. So she did not feel that she's eating something totally separate. Or we would ask her what she wanted, if there was something particular, and then provide it for her that way. So that was the best. And even with if there were people, she always wanted gatherings. So we did the same. And if we we're visiting, and this is initially before COVID, pre-COVID. So if we were going anywhere, everybody called me, what can she eat? What does she like? They made sure they made ample dishes, and that was perfect. So that's how we incorporated diet.
Okay, thank you, Uzma. Now, another question has come up, and we were talking about memory loss in partners. And I believe, Maria, you were going to make some comments about that. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my husband had some memory loss after his second surgery, after the second transplant. I think that was one of the hardest parts of it, because I was prepared for physical illness. I had an idea of what was going to happen and how things were going to present. But in all honesty, I wasn't prepared for the memory loss, for the changes on his cognitive abilities. And that was a real shock, and something that was really hard on me and on my family. How I handled it was, I talked to the team and they said this was temporary. So I engraved that on my mind and on my soul and said, this is a temporary situation and it's going to get better. And I made my labor of the day to help him through that. When we were in the hospital, I had that on my mind. This is my sole job for now. I'm going to walk him through this. And I will spend several sections of my day giving him information. So this is your name, this is where you are, this is your children, you were born this day, I am your wife, this is my name, we live in Ottawa, all that day after day and day after day. And it can be absolutely frustrating and frightening to have someone not being able to respond or to remember or to say anything. And you have to take it, as someone said before, this is the disease, it's not the person. And don't take it personally, right? Because it might feel hurtful that the person doesn't even know who you are when you have been there taking care of him for a long time. But it gets better. And my advice is take the small victories and really enjoy them. And stop thinking when this is going to come back to normal, because that can be a long time. Instead, if you set little tiny victories for yourself, it helps you feel better and the patient feel better. So let's say today, he's going to remember what date is today. And when the nurse comes and asks what date is today, and the answer is correct, you make a huge deal out of it. And then you feel happy and the person feels happy. And this is your victory. And it feels good. So my recommendation is just be patient, set yourself in the mind that it's going to get better, and enjoy the little victories, and set little tiny goals and enjoy them. And things do get better at the end.
Okay, thank you, Maria. The last topic that we had come in was about sleep and exhaustion. And Erwin was going to respond to this. Okay, go ahead and share it, Erwin.
Thank you, Andrew. Sleep is obviously pretty critical to everybody's overall health and well-being. And when you are hooked up to a machine, whether it be in the hospital or at home, clearly it's an intrusion into what the daily routine would be. You do grow accustomed to it, but when the machines start to beep at you saying you've kinked the hose or there's something else wrong, somebody has to respond to it. In my situation with Kathy, I am a very light sleeper. She will sleep through the alarms on the machine. I will get up and I will adjust it. And then she'll be very surprised in the morning when I tell her that, oh, you had a low drain volume going, so we had to fix your hose. And she doesn't remember anything at all about me moving her because she's wrapped herself around the patient line. I'm used to not sleeping very well. I am tired. But the issue is that if you cannot get by with the quote typical 8 hours of sleep and your loved one's machine is keeping you awake more than usual, you do have to address it both for yourself and for your loved one. And there is absolutely no shame in speaking to your family doctor and finding out if there is some sort of a pharmaceutical assistance that you can get. It doesn't have to be permanent. It just may be for a short while you accommodate the machine that's in your bedroom. I've done that. It's helped. I'm still a light sleeper even while I'm on medication, but I don't feel as tired. And I would recommend that if any of the other caregivers listening to this are experiencing that, they do consider going to their GPs and saying, listen, my loved one is on dialysis at home. We are having trouble sleeping, me more than her or me more than him. Is there anything that you can think of that might be able to help us? It may be something as simple as your doctor suggesting over-the-counter melatonin or a glass of milk at night or something a little bit different. But consider that your sleep as a caregiver is as important to your loved one as it is to you. And don't let it go to the point where you are run ragged and you cannot do what you intend to do.
I would add to that the value of the occasional afternoon nap. It feels like an indulgence to us, but if you can slot out an hour, even an hour, can make all the difference in terms of you're regaining some of that sleep loss and also just putting you in the right mood and frame of mind. It doesn't take like a 3-hour nap to do it. A cat nap even will help you deal with it if that is an issue for you. That's one idea.
Very true. Andrew and I would be very interested to find out if the other caregivers have come up with solutions or workarounds for them with respect to maintaining sleep.
I didn't have any trouble sleeping at home, but I did spend 42 days at Toronto General, from which a lot of that time was on the waiting room. And I slept a lot on that, or tried to sleep a lot on that waiting room. But I have to say that we need, as caregivers, our sleep is crucial. You need to be able to rest because there's a lot of situations in which you need to take hard decisions and you have to be on your set mind to be able to do it. So accepting help from others is crucial. So I had my son and my brother-in-law there, and I would go to an apartment and really close the entire room, be absolutely dark, no noise, absolutely nothing, and get myself at least 3-4 hours of sleep at night, of real sleep. Because otherwise I felt like I can't keep going like this. And even though I was super worried and I had my phone with all the volume on and vibrating on my ear in case anything happened, allow yourself to have that rest. Separate yourself from the situation for a few hours so that you can get proper rest. That's my advice.
Wonderful. We do have a question from the chat. Lisa has asked if any of the caregivers use meditation as a means of finding time to relax. Obviously, it's not the same as sleep, but there are benefits that are derived from meditation. Have any of our panelists tried that? I know that I've tried it a bit and I find some benefit, but it takes a lot of work to do to be proficient at it. And I suppose I should be trying it a little bit more, but I'd be interested to hear about other people's experience with that.
I think consistency is everything, right? If you can do it on a consistent basis, and as you said, you haven't been able to keep up with it in a matter of speaking. If I do think it helps, and for me, even if I can just breathe, the countdown makes a huge difference in my body. And just knowing how to breathe deep breaths at a certain time. So I used to do yoga at one time and then just didn't find the time. That used to help me tremendously, but it takes a lot of time. When I got busy with my mom, that was it. It just, even though we were siblings taking our time out, we had, once I got my free time, I had to give it to my home and then take your extra naps or anything else. And I was struggling with other things. So I had to go for physio appointments and other things, but just taking those, just a couple of minutes, but it's the consistency I feel. So I think a suggestion is just putting an alarm in the phone, just a
right.
timer or a remembrance at a certain time in the morning when you have even if it's 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, just sitting down and remembering, just breathing, remembering from the top to the bottom, and just those 2 minutes might help somebody. That's just a suggestion. It does help.
Thank you.
Not the same as sleep.
No, it isn't. We have a resource that we really haven't used all that much, and I'm pointing to Sarah. In the situation, we're all older, so our loved ones, Uzma's mother, Bonnie's wife, my wife, Maria's husband, Larry, Francine's husband, but we have children as well that suffer from kidney disease, and Sarah is taking care of her daughter. There are so many things that are different for a child than for a spouse. And I'm wondering if, Sarah, you could share with us some of the things that would be unique in a child system, not a system, but rather a situation. You've heard a lot about what's happening with adults, but clearly there are things that are different for Kiana.
So right now we're in a transition. So I've been doing her meds. She takes 28 meds a day, which is a huge amount, multiple times a day. And so what I've done for my husband and myself, or for Kiana, have written out the meds and the med times and what they're used for, immunosuppressant, blood pressure, that kind of stuff. So she's getting to learn that in her care, and also letting her be a kid, letting her go out independently, losing those apron strings and saying, okay, go to the mall. You have a phone. If there's a problem, call me. But in her phone are her numbers, meds, her doctor's number, what hospital to in case there is a problem. So if she's anywhere, she or someone can pick up her phone. They don't need to know her password. It's linked right on the front of it. Another thing is letting her enjoy life. So we went to Disney, even though it was COVID. We got permission to go down there and do that. She went to her first concert, Rod Stewart. Didn't know really any songs, but thanks to the Kidney Foundation, they donated the tickets to us, and she had a great time. So it's taking a step back and being a person first, and then the disease, I think, is a key thing. To put the disease will always be there, but you have to live life to its fullest as well.
As a follow-up So Kiana's 15. So mom is somebody that she has to deal with, but it's her friends who are really important. How do her friends deal with her health situation?
So it'll be interesting because she spent 5 days at high school in grade 9 and then had a transplant. Then COVID hit. So she hasn't had the high school life yet. It'll be
Okay.
in fall. She does in public. She has a G tube. She takes her meds through her G tube out in public. She doesn't go to the bathroom or anything. But her cousin and our couple friends are very accommodating with her. Oh, have you taken your meds? Oh yeah, well, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. And the drinking and the balance of a good healthy diet. So knowing when she's out to know, okay, do I need salt on my stuff? Can you accommodate me to do this? And that kind of stuff.
Okay. We do have another question from the chat. I'm going to throw it open to anybody. It talks about heartbreak. You feel for the one that you're caring for, but do you really know when they're out of control? Can you help them, or do you just feel helpless at the side of the bed? Does anybody want to take a stab at answering that? I don't know if I framed it properly, but heartbreak, you can do a lot for your loved one, but they're the one that's going through the dialysis. They're the one with the wonky kidneys. There's only so much that you can do for your person. And the heartbreak can be on their part. It can be on your part that you don't feel you're doing enough. It could be worried that they feel angry that you are not doing enough for them. It's a difficult question. I don't know if there's anybody who wants to try and take a stab at it.
I think it's a process. I don't think there's a magic bullet to how to deal with it, honestly. I think it's a process that you have to go through. That involves acceptance, first of all. It's like the stages of the 5 stages. Yeah, and one of them is ultimately realizing this is the situation and coming to grips with it, first off. And then once you've done that, then you can start to look at, how am I going to deal with it? And there it becomes a matter of managing expectations a little bit in terms of being realistic. What can you no longer do? How are you going to change the things that you were doing before? And how are you going to continue on recognizing that this is inevitable? There's nothing you can change. And again, as I mentioned earlier, being hopeful, being optimistic, and being positive. And attitude is everything. And so I don't think there's an easy answer to the question. I think it's a really difficult one.
It is.
But over time, it can be dealt with.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Can I
Francine
weigh
has her
in
hand
on
up.
that, Erwin?
Okay, just before you start, Francine, I'd like to acknowledge that we may have some of our listeners on the telephone. And if they haven't had an opportunity to ask questions, as Candice mentioned at the beginning, perhaps you can get in touch with her or just pipe up whenever there's a moment, and we will try and accommodate your questions. Francine?
I think it's an important question, and I think that the whole journey, it's such a roller coaster of emotions, both for the loved one and also for yourself as caregiver. And you have different moments, different times when you're dealing with different emotions, trying to cope with change, adapt. One thing I try, I'm not always successful at it, but is to understand, to try to put myself in the person's shoes and come at it from an empathetic point of view. I don't always succeed. I think sometimes I miss the mark. The intent is there, but maybe the way I'm expressing it is not the way that the person wants to hear it, or And I think that what David mentioned earlier was like during the day, maybe, or at the beginning of the days, what can I do to help you today? I think that goes a long way, and also try to not take it personally when expectations are not being met, or perhaps, like, my husband's a great cook and it's not something that I particularly like to do. But I've tried, and he's from the Caribbean, and so I've tried from time to learn some of those recipes and try to cook some of those things, but it's I know it's not as tasty as when he makes it. But so expectations, I think we all have different expectations, and I think my own health scare in the last 5 weeks, where he had to help me with certain things, opened my eyes to see I also have expectations in terms of how I wanted to be helped, and it wasn't, he was trying his best to help me the way he thought he should. And I think that's something that opened my eyes too, that the things that I'm trying to help him with are the ways that I think I would like to be helped, but it's not necessarily the way he wants to be helped. And
Very
so
true.
I think it's so important to tap into, you know, what they need. And I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Love Languages, and there's basically 5 different ways that people express their love. And so for some, it's acts of service, quality time, and or gifts, affection, affirmation. And I think that we sometimes come at it from the point of view of how we want to receive that love or whatever, not thinking about how the other person, what their needs are. And so in summary, I would say I try not to personalize it, try to step into my husband's shoes and try to see it how he sees it or what he needs. And it's a difficult journey at times. We're all human beings and we all have emotions, and sometimes we need to step away, take a breath, leave the room, breathe, like Uzma was saying, or just and come back in the room when our own disposition or attitude is perhaps a little bit better to cope with it. But I think not personalizing it is so important too. And yeah, remember that they're going through stuff and it's a disease, and look at it that way. Yeah.
Very true. Andrew, did you have any commentary that you wanted to add?
No.
I see by the chat that we don't have any more questions. There was a comment by Barbara regarding respite, which is something that I think we might be able to discuss offline in a particular case. So what I would like to do, we had booked until 1:30, but we had anticipated more questions. So since there are no questions on the chat, I will ask if there's any final comments that our panelists would like to add. Uzma?
I'm good. I was just going to add actually for what Francine and David had just talked a little while ago, and what you had questioned, because I had a little something to say about that too, is because with my mom, it started, there was a lot of anger or frustration on her part that she felt that we all did too much, and she was upset that she was asking too much of us. And the heartbreak is there that we felt that we weren't doing enough. And so, because you're a child looking at a parent, she's a parent looking at a child, so different that way. And but for me, I was a care provider for her since my father passed away, since 2006. So I was just naturally prone to doing that. And this just was another step to doing something. This was a lot more, definitely. This was more full-time, because she was more independent before, but less. But this was an ongoing battle, by the way, with her, because the more weaker or she got, or less independent over time, she felt frustrated. She felt she was putting her children through a lot more. And that was a battle we had to take. We had to talk to her about it. We had to convince her that So I'm sure everybody goes through it with their spouse, with their children, maybe not the children as much because they just naturally receive it from their parents, but and parents do it lovingly, of course. But I think parents feel a burden to their children that way, especially married children with their own families. So my mom felt that a lot, and she would cry a lot. And she was a person of faith. I'm a strong person of faith. So she would constantly, when she did give in at times, she would pray a lot, and she would pray for us and our well-beings. And that is something I miss, of course. But that was a hard part, is that she felt burdened. But so we all had to do a lot of convincing on our parts. But I will also say little things matter. So the little joys that we had to try and come up with, nothing had to be too grand. So we try to make the best of it. It was like just taking her to the backyard. My brother-in-law had wonderful backyard skills, gardening skills. The flowers were there. So just doing the little things with her, just that was, I think, ample in giving them those little joys and trying to show her that we're not going so much out of our way, and just sitting down and watching a TV show with her. Now that was difficult because her eyesight was going. So I think that became very depressive for her too. So sitting with her and just trying to watch a TV show, whatever she could, because that was the one joy she had, and that was also being taken away. So it was a tough time that way. And so that is all part of heartbreak, is what I would say. And it's tough to see them go down that path. But like I said, it was an honor, and I'd do it again. And if I was given that to continue with.
I understand completely. Sarah, are there any last comments that you'd like to add to our webinar?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is live life to the fullest. Enjoy the little things, enjoy the accomplishments, and know when to let go. The doctor said to me, you don't have to do our blood pressure every day. It's okay if it fluctuates. Like, you don't have to worry so much. So enjoy the simple things in life, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. There has been a series of comments in the chat from Barbara, and Francine has offered to respond to Barbara's commentary. So Francine?
So the one that I'll address is the respite. And Barbara, I think you live near Toronto, I'm not sure, but in the case here in Ottawa, so in the last 5 weeks when I wasn't able to bring my husband to medical appointments, and there is a group in Ottawa that's called Seniors on Site, and they will help with whatever your needs are. They can provide drivers, they even provide people who are handymen, help with outside landscaping, all that kind of stuff. But they have drivers, and other community groups also have drivers, but they will also come and just spend 2-3 hours. If, like in the case of my husband, he was getting really he felt housebound, and he just needed to go out and just go for a drive. And so they did that for 2 or 3 hours. They took him out to the market area and back, and it gave him a really good break. There are community groups that exist. Barb, I think every city here in Brampton, I think every city has access to, so if you put in the Google search 211 and you put in the city that you're in, all kinds of community services pop up, and then you can specify what it is that you need, like respite help. And I think every major city has access to that type of website. So 211, and just type in what you need. You can just also put respite services. So I don't know if there's a Seniors on Site group in where you are in Brampton, but there would be some complementary or similar type of services, I would think. Yeah.
Thanks, Nancy.
I would also think the social worker might be able to help a little bit with that.
Yeah. Maria, are there any last words that you'd like to add to our conversations this afternoon?
Yeah, I think that as caregivers, it is important to know that it is a very difficult journey, and that we and the patient should be allowed to have sad moments and not just try to. It is a good advice to say that you should be positive and happy and irradiate sunshine, but it's a long journey and not always that's possible. And it shouldn't be, because we need to express our feelings and we need to have that moment to cry it out.
Good point.
And then,
Pity party.
yeah, I had really good cry outs in the shower when no one was seeing. And it really helps. You come out of that moment feeling, okay, I rested, like I can do this again. I just needed a moment. But give yourself those moments to feel sad and to cry and to be angry at the world. And then you will be fine. And let the patient have those moments too, because sometimes the expectation is for the patient to be always positive and enjoying and living the life fullest. But it's not always the case. So let them have that moment when they are sad and depressed and cry and be angry. Just try not to be that way, both of you at the same time, right? Like if your patient is in that state, then you have to irradiate sunshine.
True
But
enough.
give yourself also moments to not be in a sunshine mood and go cry it out and come back. I did a lot of walking. When I'm sad or depressed or stressed out, I walk miles and miles and listen at the birds, and that helps too. So find your way to find that thing that helps you get relaxed. That's my advice.
And David, any last words from you, sir?
Of course.
Is this going to be a joke?
No, it's not going to be
Okay.
a joke. What I wanted to emphasize a little bit was it's on our shoulders as caregivers, but really the importance of the friends, family, and others in your life can help a lot. I know that our friends, they're well-intentioned. They're all well-intentioned. They don't really understand necessarily what dialysis is. They have a lot of misconceptions about how it happens, how effective it is, and you might as well talk about an iron lung or something. It's that foreign to them. So the more that you can give them an understanding of the pros of it, the mechanics of it, even show them how the equipment and whatnot, that can go a long way. I think they want to help. They want to provide encouragement. I know our friends, for instance, if they invite us over for dinner, it's okay, what dietary restrictions does Bonnie have? What food should we avoid? How much time can we take together before fatigue comes in? Do we have to limit our times? So they're very sensitive to the needs. And that's really appreciated and important. I also want to end with the whole idea of the attitude of gratitude. You have to put things in perspective. Things can always be worse. They can always be better. They should never get worse, my sister used to say. And I really think that I agree completely with what Maria is saying. We're not superhuman. We're entitled to feel sad and depressed and have our cries and our downtimes. But as long as it doesn't dominate the focus of our being, because there are always so many blessings that we have to think about and appreciate to balance the picture.
Lovely, lovely. Andrew and I have a couple of housekeeping things to take care of, and then I think we can safely conclude today's seminar. First of all, thank you everybody for joining. I found this particularly informative and refreshing. I really did enjoy it. We have a caregivers virtual support group that meets. Our next meeting will be Thursday, the 18th of August at 6:30. And that's going to be in conjunction with Caregivers for Children Living with Kidney Disease. Oh, I'm sorry, that is on the 11th of August at 7 till 8:30. I will suggest that if you are interested in either of these two groups, to go to ontario.programs@kidneyca to register, or you can get in touch with Sadia and she will make sure that you are on the list. Andrew?
Okay, yeah. Says the Center for Living Organ Donation has monthly webinars with information for potential donors and recipients. We also have webinars for caregivers for people on kidney and liver wait lists. And that is the 5th Tuesday of the month. And that means that they're not every month. There are a few months where there's 5 Tuesdays. Our next webinar is on August 30th at 12 p.m. They have launched their 3rd season of Living Transplant podcasts, which can be found on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more information about finding resources or support about living organ donations, please reach out to, I believe this did get posted, a living organ donation, all one word, at uhn.ca. And by the way, Living Donation Week is September 11th to the 17th. Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and I'll give it over to Candace.
Thank you. And I think just to add to what all of you have said, on behalf of the Center for Living Organ Donation and the Kidney Foundation, great big thanks to you, Erwin and Andrew, for moderating today and providing so much amazing insight and education from all of you caregivers. We're so grateful to have such a rock star team to provide so much support to everyone. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.